Folks, we are 2 days into 2022 and already Mark Gurman is dropping some bombs on us about what I think could be one of the most exciting years for the Mac in a really long time. And yeah, I know I said that in 2020 and I said that in 2021, but I'm saying it again because this year, 2022, is shaping up to be better than both of those. So today we're going to talk about what we're expecting. So make sure to get subscribed because this is going to be a fun year. So first things first, I did not expect to make a video this soon into 2022. As you might know, January is usually pretty quiet. There's not a ton of Apple news that goes on. There's not a ton of tech news that goes on except for CES, but well, CES is going to be screwed this year, so forget about that. But here we have Gurman coming out today with some absolutely major news bombs. And yeah, a lot of this is products that we've already heard about, but he's doubling and tripling and quadrupling down on really credible information. And that's newsworthy because when you hear the same thing getting reported on from multiple sources with increasing detail, that is your clue to be like, okay, all right, this is legitimate information. Now, if you're watching this episode and you're like, I wish I could see a more in-depth and detailed discussion of Apple's 2022 Mac plans. Well, guess what? You're in luck because today is the first episode of Dark Mode, my podcast that I co-host with Noah Rubin for 2022. And today we've got a special guest star, Ian Zelbo, who's responsible for creating most of the renders that you've seen for these upcoming Apple products. So the three of us are going to be unpacking everything, and if you're watching right now, make sure you're subscribed and check back today at 9 p.m. EST to check that out. If you're watching the video later, I've got a link to the stream recording popping out right up there. So let's get started with today's video. So first off, Mark Gurman is saying this year is the year that the Apple Silicon transition is complete. That is really good news because I was a little bit nervous there for a while. For most of 2021, as we were seeing this really slow rollout, the M1 chip didn't get a successor until a year after its launch, almost, in October with the M1 Pro and the M1 Max. And so, looking at that, you're like, wow, the timeline for the Mac Pro is going to take a really long time. But Gurman is now saying that Apple is going to be doing this, and I might add, by WWDC. So what does that mean? Well, this actually supports what I have been predicting for quite a while, albeit with less information than what Gurman has, obviously. And that is that Apple tends to launch their really high-end Pro stuff at WWDC. So 2013, the Trash Can Mac Pro, it was revealed at WW and it launched in December. Then in 2017, the iMac Pro had the same thing. And then in 2019, the current generation Intel Mac Pro, again, same deal. Reveal at WW, launch in December. So Gurman is basically saying that this is the blueprint that Apple's going to be using this time around. And I think it makes a lot of sense. And another thing that this does for us is it gives us a lot of room to infer Apple's plans about timing. Because I think the fact that the Mac Pro could launch or could be revealed at WWDC does tell us that it is most likely going to be based on the M1 series architecture, right? We've heard a lot of talk about the new redesigned MacBook Air, and I was always kind of like, if Apple's going to be launching a MacBook Air in like April or even September, it would be weird to launch an M2 product and then after that, in like October or November, launch a Mac Pro with M1 based processors. But I think this solves that problem because if you have the Mac Pro come out at WWDC, then it's much closer to the M1 Pro and M1 Max launch event. Launch it, M1 Pro, still relevant, and then later in the year, we'll probably get the M2 MacBook Air, probably around October again. But let's also keep in mind that Gurman is saying that the transition could be complete, period. So that's not just the Mac Pro. There's the 27-inch iMac and the higher-end Intel Mac Mini. Those still need to be replaced. So Gurman is essentially saying that we should expect those two devices before WWDC. And Gurman is saying that this is essentially going to be a broader rollout of the M1 Pro and M1 Max chips in different form factors. He says that this includes a smaller Mac Pro with 40 CPU cores, as well as the new Mac Mini and a new larger iMac Pro that we've been hearing about for quite a while. And to me that makes a fair bit of sense, because realistically the M1 Pro and the M1 Max are not going to be altered when they are implemented in the larger screened iMac and the new Mac Mini. Now, the new iMac, I think, is going to be a really compelling product. We've heard multiple reports from Ross Young and others. By the way, Ross Young is like always correct, and he said a 27-inch mini LED ProMotion panel would be coming to the iMac, and I think that is just fantastic. The one thing that I'm a little bit disappointed by is that the consensus seems to be that the larger iMac will remain 27 inches. So whereas the smaller iMac went from 21.5 to 24.5, sadly it doesn't seem like we're going to get a 30 or 32-inch iMac this time around, and that is a bit of a bummer, because I think the ability to have a large screened device, well, I would like to take that opportunity. I've been on 27-inch iMacs for quite a while, and I don't know, I'm kind of ready for something bigger, especially if Apple's going to be reducing the bezels. If you don't want a 27-inch 5K display, that's what the Mac Mini is for. And I think this year it's going to be really, really compelling. I've talked about what I expect the new M1 Pro or M1 Max Mac Mini to start at. I think it's probably going to be somewhere between $1399 and $1699, depending on what they choose for the starting configuration. If it mirrors the 14-inch MacBook Pro with that double binned processor, expect it to be a little on the lower end, $1299, $1399, $1499. If they decide, like they did with the M1 Mac Mini, not to use any binned processors, then maybe it'll be $1599 or $1699. Either way, I think a pretty compelling price for, having an M1 Pro in it. 16 gigabytes of RAM minimum, 512 gigabytes of storage minimum. I think that's going to be a really compelling product, and the fact that you can pair it with whatever display you want is definitely good to hear. And in fact, speaking of displays, Gurman has some news on that front. So according to Mark Gurman, Apple is developing a new external display that's around half the price of the Pro Display XDR. And that is really big news. I think this is what we can expect with mini LED as a technology. Obviously, mini LED has caused an increase in price on the display panels that we saw in the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, as well as the MacBook Pros. But when you're talking about the Pro Display XDR, a $5,000 display before even getting the stand, then mini LED is actually going to be reducing production costs pretty significantly. And I think it should allow Apple to maintain the excellent color reproduction, resolution, and breathtaking HDR that the Pro Display XDR is known for, but we should be able to see improvements to viewing angles as well as blooming by dramatically increasing the number of local dimming zones. The current Pro Display XDR has 576. The new one, the freaking iPad has like 2,000 of them, so I would expect there to be a enormous amount of local dimming zones in this new Pro Display XDR, and if it's $2,500, that is going to be way more compelling for a lot of people, especially if it's 32 inches and 6K. I'm going to buy that immediately. Now, before you go get all excited and get your hopes up, we're not actually sure that this is going to be a display that we see this year. Gurman said that he is hoping that the new external display launches in the coming year, 2022, but that's not exactly like, a glowing endorsement for this thing coming out at WWDC. I think it would make sense for Apple to launch a 32-inch Pro Display XDR alongside an Apple Silicon Mac Pro, because, if you're buying a Mac Pro, you have to have a display to go with it, and Apple wants to sell you that display for $2,500. Heck yeah. So I think it would make a lot of sense for those things to come out together, but Gurman is definitely not committing to any date here. But if you're a little bit bummed about that Pro Display coming out sometime, or maybe the price point still being too high, you should be in luck, because leaker Dylan DKT has come out saying that Apple is actually working on 3 external displays. that Pro Display XDR successor, as well as 2 others that would basically be the displays taken straight out of the upcoming 27-inch iMac and the current 24-inch iMac, but in their own separate display enclosure. This is basically what Apple used to do with the Thunderbolt Cinema display. It was straight out of the 27-inch iMac, but it was just in its own enclosure. And this is also basically what Apple did with the LG Ultrafine 4 and 5K displays. Now, those weren't Apple branded, but they were the same exact panels, which were manufactured by LG, as will the current ones in the upcoming iMacs be. And they just had them in separate enclosures that you could plug in. So I think we should expect the exact same thing to happen here. An Apple-made enclosure with some whatever features. Maybe they'll put speakers and a webcam and microphones in it. I don't know. But we should expect to see those, I don't know, again, this year would make sense. You know, theoretically, it's the same exact panels. The 24-inch iMac has already been out for 10 months or so, so there's no reason, in my mind, not to just, you know, slap a different enclosure on it and release that whenever you feel like it. Maybe alongside the Mac Mini, which would be a great target audience, because I think this new Pro higher-end Mac Mini is going to be really popular. Theoretically, you could build yourself the exact same computer as the 27-inch iMac with the same specs and the same display, but you'd have the added potential of replacing the display or replacing the computer separately whenever you want. And that could drive costs down significantly, because when you replace an iMac, you have to replace everything. But if you are fine with that 27-inch ProMotion mini-LED display for several years, you could swap out the Mac Mini when the M2 Pro comes out. I don't know, there's a lot of potential there. I'm definitely going to be unpacking that on the podcast. So yeah, I'm really excited for this year. We've got a lot to look forward to. Mac Mini, So yeah, I'm definitely excited for this year. There is a lot to look forward to. We've got new Mac Mini, new iMac Pro or iMac 27-inch, new Mac Pro, a new MacBook Air. We've also got older rumors that I've talked about in previous videos about a replacement to the M1 MacBook Pro. We don't have a lot of details about that, but that's like 5 new Macs coming out, as well as 3 external displays, something that people have really been wanting from Apple for a long time. This is going to be a pretty exciting year. So let me know in the comments below what you're most excited for. And as usual, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video.